We're doing awesome, Courtney. First of all, happy, healthy New Year to you. So, look, I know they went from, 9 to 10. Hey, they lost. They could have got to 7. It's way sweeter to watch Caleb Williams take you into field goal range and then Cairo Santos to drill it to beat the Pack up there especially. What was your biggest takeaway from yesterday?
The fact that a 2-minute drive actually worked out for this team at the end of the game. Like, we've seen so many of these get dismantled because of a tipped Hail Mary, a blocked field goal, time running out on the Bears in Detroit. So I think for Caleb and for this entire offense to go into that moment and to come out after 53 seconds on the winning side of that, yeah, it's 5 wins. They knocked themselves back a spot or two in the draft order. Does that really matter at the end of the day, especially with how many needs they have on the roster and no clear-cut pick that they're, putting themselves out of the range of? No, it doesn't. And, just to see it happen, because so many times they came so close. And I think for this team and where they want to go this year and what Caleb was talking about yesterday, this being, a nice momentum boost going into 2025. Obviously, it's a long way away from the season starting and even them getting to OTAs and then training camp and everything else in the off season. But to finally put their money where their mouth is for a change, for Caleb and DJ Moore to connect on that 18-yarder to put them into field goal range after DJ, was flagged for the illegal shift and then the fumble before that. To right their wrongs in a critical moment in a gotta-have-it situation, something they failed at, frankly, throughout so many other points of the season. It showed that at least when it counted, their last chance to do it, that they could.
Courtney, I thought that the defense set the tone for the game, and that was unexpected, obviously, because we've seen a 10-game losing streak here. But what stood out most about the defensive effort by the Bears yesterday?
Coming off that Seattle game where they held them to 6 points, that felt like that was something that, rejuvenated them a little bit. That even when the pass rush wasn't getting home at previous points this season, that they could find ways to keep teams at bay. And, I thought they did that. And I think, this is the first time we see them play with a lead and play with momentum that comes off of that. And I think that helps the defense in a lot of different ways. But, to go against a backup quarterback for the majority of that game after Jordan Love got knocked out with that elbow injury, they didn't let Malik Willis look like Jordan Love. It's probably the easiest way to say it because, for the Packers going into a playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles and they were hoping that they could improve their positioning and, steal the 6th seed away from Washington, they didn't look like a team that's going to be that confident having to go on the road first week of the the wild card round. So I think a lot of that has to do with the way that the Bears defense was able to stifle them on 3rd down and to be able to shorten some of those drives up and, to not let Josh Jacobs run all over you, to not, some of the issues that this team has had, the run defense being a big problem this year, really hasn't been the last couple weeks.
Would you be surprised if the Bears hired, I'll give you a name, Aaron Glenn? Or would you be surprised if they hired Pete Carroll and not Ben Johnson?
Well, I think what we know about Ben Johnson and what we've heard and what's been reported is that he's going to be very selective in this process. And the Bears and Jacksonville kind of are on level playing field here with general managers that are being retained from the previous staff when there has been a head coaching change that's been made. So I think it's pretty important to note that it's not like Jacksonville has, they're not way ahead of the Bears in terms of the attractiveness of the job. So I still think that that's probably where they should be shooting their shot and setting their sights on right now. But if it is an Aaron Glenn, if it is one of these names that, might not have been like the front runner because A, it's not an offensive candidate, B, it's somebody whose name, like an Anthony Weaver too, that's been popping up as of late. Would it surprise me? No, it wouldn't, because they're if you have to, go for the top of the top, you probably don't you're probably not going to, I don't know how to even say this. It's like, that's not a lock that you're going to get the guy. You know what I mean? There's more problems in Chicago than not. And I think you really have to sell that. A safer option, there's more safer options than there are not. in this coaching pool candidacy that we're going to see here unfold over the next couple of days, and names and permission slips and all that stuff getting put out there, and requests being put in to interview these people. So it wouldn't surprise me, Cap, but I still don't think that that's going, like, they can't go for their safety school first. They have to go and go for the dream option, which is going to be a big name like Ben Johnson.
Watch the Vikings and Packers yesterday, watch the Lions, and just see how strong those teams are. And then look at the Bears. I mean, how much of a digging out process will this be for the Bears, who, no matter who the coach is, to try to get better talent in here?
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty significant just because, it starts up front on both sides. I mean, we saw, I guess the right word is to neglect. We saw them neglect the offensive line, going after backups to fill starters' roles in the offseason. We saw them try to patchwork the pass rush and not land a premier pass rusher opposite Montez Sweat, and it affected them because he was getting doubled. He was getting chipped all season long. His sack numbers weren't there. And that's not what you expect from some guy that you're paying $25 million to. Now, certainly some of that's on him. I think there is a question to be raised about how much he's playing, too, because the return on investment's not there, in my opinion. But, it didn't really help him do his job better or be more efficient at his job because there were things that weren't addressed. And they've got ample cap space to go solve some of these needs in free agency. And certainly within the draft, knowing that they've got that extra second-round pick from Carolina, they can start chipping away at it even further. But I think what you and I talked about last week, Hoodie, is that this is not going to be a one-year process, fix the roster, get a new head coach, and then they're on their way. There's things that they have to do to begin chipping away at this that the cost of doing business elsewhere. But there's some pretty obvious holes: pass rush, pass protection, certainly, in the receiver room too. All that talent and a rather underwhelming season for all three of the Bears' top receivers. You got to figure that part out if you want to be a competitive team and be able to compete with the best in the NFC North to start.
Courtney, in terms of looking at Ryan Poles, I know there's some misses in the draft. There are some things. I don't know whether it was his call to keep Matt Eberflus after last year or ownership said we're not eating 3 years of money. I don't know the true answers to all of that. Where are you on Ryan Poles, and where do you think the Bears are? You don't expect any news today, right? Unless it's to announce they're extending his deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say what I've been saying for months now. He's safe. I do not expect that there will be any move with Ryan Poles, and that's kind of been the prevailing idea out of Hallis Hall amid all the turmoil in the last 5 weeks where they weren't able to win a game until week 18. There's a belief that, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. And I think so much of that was on the coaching staff and kind of the mentality that the Bears took on with Matt Eberflus. They gave him a roster. These coaching decisions, time management, game management, those things are not on the people who built this team. And that's, it's an excuse for now, or rather it's a reasoning for keeping Ryan Poles. He's not the one who didn't call a timeout in Detroit. He's not the one who, had a field goal blocked because of some protection issues in the interior. But these are his players too. So, he's judged by them just as much as anybody else would be in his position. And that only increases the intensity surrounding him to nail it in this offseason. What we expect is that, a general manager coming in, a head coach coming in, working with a general manager who, was retained from the last staff. That head coach is going to have questions about how long that general manager is going to be here, who has the final say on the 53 and personnel decisions. Is there, are their timelines going to link up? So there's still a lot of questions that we need to find out and have answered about Ryan Poles. And he's expected to talk tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to tell us, I'm being extended. But you'd expect that if you have Ben Johnson, if you have one of these head coaching candidates that they can't miss guy, or how it's being positioned as they can't miss guy, that's going to be somebody you line up with to say, hey, come here because you're going to have stability. You're not coming in with a general manager who might be on his way out. That's something that's a sacrifice the Bears have to make financially to make this thing work. And if they're committed to doing it right, then you should hear about something like that coming up, like an extension coming up this week.
Caleb Williams, 18th in yards amongst quarterbacks, 33.93, tied for 15th with Tua, Stroud in that category, number 1 in sacks, and 30th in average yards completed. What is your overall letter grade in year one for Caleb Williams?
Probably put it at a C+, B-. There's a lot that was good. Obviously, I think where he's at right now, 5th most all-time in a single season in Bears history. And I know there's fans who are going to look at that and say he threw a lot of yards in some of those games in the back half of the season in garbage time. The bar's low, guys, as we know. The bar was like on the floor in Chicago for quarterback play. You got to start somewhere. And I think there were a lot of flashes from Caleb Williams that show you with the right coaching, with some of the things that are broken, habits that are broken in the offseason when he really has time to pare down things that aren't working in his game, that he can live up to that status as a number 1 overall pick and live up to, what's been put on him as the savior of this franchise. That's a lot. That's a lot for anybody to take on, no matter where you're drafted, especially as a young player. And he got a taste of it here and how serious it is and how much people's livelihoods rest on him in Chicago. I didn't expect it to be perfect. There were moments where you definitely expected it to look better than it did. And even yesterday, like the vertical passing game, where was it? Why was everything going horizontal? Why is he waiting? I mean, the first sack of the game, he put it on himself as he should have. There's a lot of moments that you can grow from this year, but given the circumstances, given the fact that he's probably onto his 3rd offensive coordinator, 3rd play caller in 18 games by the time he starts his sophomore season in Chicago, I think he's doing the best he can with some pretty unforeseen circumstances. I don't know if anybody else, if any of the other quarterbacks drafted after him, if they were put in Chicago and had to deal with the same thing, I don't know if it would have been much better.
So if the draft of 2024 was being held tonight, do the Chicago Bears still say
yes,
Chicago selects
10 out of 10,
Caleb Williams?
I know where you're, yes. I cannot stand when people want to play revisionist history on this.
I agree with you.
They would pick Caleb 10 out of 10 times.
Agreed.
Everyone was saying the same thing. I know that everybody now wants to be like, oh, look, Jaden Daniels. Man, he should have been number 1 all along. There was a case to be made that the Bears did not do their due diligence. And I will give people credence on that. They didn't do much homework on Jaden Daniels. And that's alarming to me. Like, you can't be so arrogant to believe that, wow, Caleb's the only one for us. We're not going to look elsewhere. We're not going to do our homework. We're not going to have the guy in on a top 30 visit for a number of different reasons, because we're so convicted that Caleb's the guy. And also we don't want to, upset the quarterback coming in or his people or any of the other things that might have been at play there in March and April when they were dead set on Caleb and only Caleb. I think there's a learning experience for everybody in that you do your homework on other people, especially at that position, so you have all of the information. To circumvent that process a little bit is not great, but they would absolutely take Caleb again and again and again, knowing what they know then and knowing what they know now. And anybody who says otherwise is just being disingenuous about it, because the rhetoric around any of the other quarterbacks not knowing what they were going to pan out to be in 2024, none of it was any different than what it is now, frankly, around these quarterbacks.
Check out Courtney's piece on ESPN.com. Inside Caleb Williams' tumultuous rookie season as Bears quarterback. Great piece. Look for it on ESPN.com. Courtney, as always, we appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on.